It's expected to be a large-scale deal between Canada and Germany, specifically German company Ksi and a Canadian project called Ksi Lisims LNG. And the implications in Canada could be huge.
Canada and Germany reached a new landmark energy deal this week. German energy company Ksi will buy 1 million tons of LNG a year from Canada through BC's Ksi Lisims project.
This contract represents the first agreement that we see long-term, low-carbon LNG from Canada being shipped to our allies in Europe.
Canada announced two major agreements that could reshape its future as an energy exporter. Germany secured long-term access to Canadian liquefied natural gas through a new supply agreement tied to a massive export project on Canada's Pacific coast. The development marks Canada's first long-term LNG supply arrangement with Germany and reflects a broader shift in the country's export strategy beyond the United States. Canada and Germany have expanded their energy partnership through agreements centered on the proposed Ksi Lisims LNG project in northern British Columbia. Germany's state-owned energy company, SIEF, signed a long-term agreement to purchase up to 1 million metric tons of liquefied natural gas every year from the project. According to Reuters, the contract is expected to run for up to 20 years after commercial operations begin in the early 2030s. The agreement remains subject to a final investment decision and regulatory approvals before construction proceeds. The Ksi Lisims LNG project is planned for the northern coast of British Columbia. It is designed to export Canadian natural gas to international markets through the Pacific Ocean. Project developers have stated that the facility will use electric-powered liquefaction technology intended to reduce greenhouse gas emissions compared with conventional LNG terminals. The project is backed by the Nisga'a Nation, Rockies LNG, and Western LNG. The announcement came during a period of expanding economic cooperation between Canada and Germany. In early June, Prime Minister Mark Carney and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz confirmed another provisional agreement supporting future Canadian LNG deliveries to Germany. Reuters reported that the memorandum strengthens the earlier commercial arrangement and deepens bilateral cooperation in energy, minerals, infrastructure, and industrial investment. Germany has actively searched for alternative natural gas suppliers since Russian pipeline deliveries declined following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Before the conflict, Germany depended heavily on Russian pipeline gas. Since then, Berlin has invested in floating LNG import terminals and signed supply agreements with several producing countries to diversify its energy imports. Canadian LNG has become part of that diversification strategy because of Canada's large natural gas reserves and planned export capacity on the Pacific coast. The agreement also reflects a broader change in Canada's export policy. For decades, the overwhelming majority of Canadian natural gas exports have gone to the United States through an integrated North American pipeline network. Canada has remained one of America's largest foreign energy suppliers. However, almost all Canadian gas exports historically moved south because the country lacked large-scale LNG export terminals capable of serving overseas markets. The construction of export terminals on Canada's west coast changes that equation. Once operational, facilities such as Ksi Lisims LNG will allow Canadian producers to reach customers in Europe and Asia without relying solely on pipeline exports into the United States. This creates additional export options rather than replacing existing American demand. Some headlines suggested that the United States had been excluded from the agreement. The published agreements do not support that interpretation. The deal does not terminate existing U.S. supply contracts. It does not redirect gas currently flowing into the United States. Instead, it establishes future LNG exports from a project that has not yet entered commercial production. The agreement expands Canada's list of customers rather than removing existing ones. The Associated Press reported that Prime Minister Mark Carney described the agreement as part of Canada's effort to diversify export markets while strengthening economic relationships with democratic allies. Canada has emphasized expanding trade beyond a single export destination while maintaining its long-standing commercial relationship with the United States. The commercial agreement assigns Germany's SEFE the right to purchase up to 1 million metric tons of LNG annually from Ksi Lisims. Reuters reported that the contract begins after the project starts operations, which developers currently target for the early 2030s. Construction has not yet started, because the project still requires investment approvals, environmental permits, financing, and final regulatory authorization. The timing of the agreement is significant because global LNG demand has increased following changes in international energy markets over the past several years. European countries have signed long-term contracts with suppliers in the United States, Qatar, Australia, Norway, and other producing nations. Canada has sought to join that market after years of delays involving proposed LNG export terminals. Germany's state-owned Cefe has become one of Europe's largest natural gas importers following its restructuring during the European energy crisis. The company has signed supply agreements across several continents to secure long-term deliveries for German consumers and industrial users. The Canadian agreement adds another future source to its expanding portfolio. Reuters quoted Cefe chief executive Egbert Lage, who said, "This agreement marks another important milestone in diversifying Cefe's LNG portfolio." The statement accompanied the announcement of the commercial agreement tied to Ksi Lisims LNG. Canadian officials have also highlighted the economic significance of expanding LNG exports. New export terminals create opportunities for upstream natural gas production, infrastructure investment, construction activity, and long-term export revenues. British Columbia's Pacific coastline provides direct shipping access across the Pacific Ocean, allowing cargoes to reach Asian markets while remaining available for global trading routes, serving Europe through LNG cargo swaps. Although Germany is the named buyer under this agreement, LNG operates within a global market. Cargoes can be traded, redirected, or exchanged depending on commercial arrangements and market conditions. Physical shipments from Canada will ultimately depend on production schedules, transportation logistics, destination contracts, and international demand once the project enters operation. The Wall Street Journal reported that Canada views the agreement as part of a broader objective to establish itself as a larger global energy supplier, rather than remaining almost entirely dependent on exports to one country. Expanding LNG capacity gives Canadian producers access to international pricing and additional customers beyond North America. Prime Minister Mark Carney emphasized Canada's broader economic direction during the announcement. According to the Associated Press, Carney stated, "Canada has what the world needs." The statement referred to Canada's energy resources, critical minerals, technology, and industrial capacity as the government promotes expanded international partnerships. The agreement also arrives while Canada continues discussions with allies regarding critical minerals, clean energy, defense cooperation, and industrial investment. Germany has identified Canada as an important long-term partner because of its resource base and political stability. Energy cooperation has become one element of a wider economic relationship that has expanded following changes in Europe's energy security strategy after 2022. Ksi Lisims LNG itself remains a proposed project rather than an operating export terminal. Before any LNG reaches Germany under the agreement, developers must complete engineering work, financing, environmental approvals, construction, and commissioning. Commercial operations are currently expected during the early years of the next decade, if all required approvals proceed according to schedule. Until then, Canada's natural gas exports will continue to flow primarily to the United States through existing pipeline infrastructure. The Germany agreement represents a future expansion of Canadian export capacity instead of a replacement for current North American energy trade. It signals Canada's effort to participate more directly in the global LNG market while giving Germany another planned long-term source of natural gas outside traditional pipeline suppliers.